Let's get to the news. All right, to kick things off this week, let's start with a couple of hoaxes that have taken the news by storm in the culture war. So the first is a bomb threat that happened this past week at Boston Children's Hospital. So this is from The Advocate. Police officials in Massachusetts were investigating a bomb threat at Boston Children's Hospital since Tuesday. I guess is when the call came on Tuesday. And for weeks, it says right-wing troll Chaya Raichik, who runs the transphobic Libs of TikTok Twitter account, has aimed her followers at the hospital, falsely claiming that inside doctors are mutilating children under the guise of gender-affirming care. So obviously, you know where they're coming from. Hard left, source here. But let's run with it. Somebody made a threatening phone call at the hospital at 8 p.m., but no bombs were found, according to Boston Police Department. Okay, and so they have some video here. Apparently on Tuesday there was a bomb threat called in. The police were called. The bomb squad came in, and there was no signs of a bomb on the premises. Boston's Children's Hospital put out a kind of a statement, basically condemning the action, and also almost giving a veiled kind of jab here at the right. So they say, we remain vigilant in our efforts to battle the spread of false information about the hospital and its caregivers. So basically they're almost implying that this was not just a random bomb threat. This was due to the right and Libs of TikTok and Shia, whatever her last name is. So interesting development in the culture war. This all comes because Libs of TikTok has been for weeks now, like basically pointing out the child abuse basically that's happening at this hospital. It's not, a false claim, as they say here, that doctors are mutilating children. That they actually have a ton of evidence to support that. I think the hospital scrubbed its website to remove evidence of that. There's various video out there of doctors saying, pretty, extensively and in detail exactly what they do. But this is just kind of another escalation in the culture war. The aim seems to be to pretty much discredit Libs of TikTok and the right as being, violent people. And so Libs of TikTok, she was on with Jackpot, and they are basically raising or trying to raise money to reward any sort of tips that can lead to the identification of the person responsible for this bomb threat. So Jackpot, Human Events, and also that guy from Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, they are collectively offering $50,000 to anybody who can reveal the identity of who actually called in. So we'll see, how the story develops. I'll keep you posted, whether it's a right wing incident by some crazy person who wanted to take action, or if it's a left wing kind of a false flag operation. We'll see. My guess is that it's probably, a left wing person who wants to do a false flag operation and make the right look bad. That seems to be a clear incentive. But my guess is we may never know because, if they can't even find people who SWAT like Tim Pool or Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm fairly doubtful that they'll be able to even trace this back effectively to find out who did this. But it is a pretty effective smear on Libs of TikTok that can come back to kind of harm her in the future if there are any legal or kind of law enforcement actions down the road, or just kind of adding to her currently bad press from the left. So kind of in a related sort of hoax story, there was an interesting development out of BYU not too long ago that I wanted to highlight here. So the story is, look, BYU, they were hosting a game against Duke's female volleyball team, and there was an accusation that a BYU fan basically was hurling racial slurs throughout the entire game. So Duke called this out. BYU took the person that Duke sort of named as being the slur person and kicked them out of the venue. They got banned from the venue. But then they come back and they're like, hey, we didn't actually have any proof that this fan did anything wrong. We don't have the entire incident was recorded. We even have full video of that individual who was banned, and we don't see any racial slurs from that individual. And so you have the BYU athletic director coming out and saying that, and you also have the the police, right? So BYU police, whatever, George says that he didn't find any proof that the man yelled slurs after reviewing the video record, but yet he was still kicked out. And then what happened was there was this pretty sick, extensive thread done to kind of unpack this, I guess, by kind of a local newspaper. So this is the girl who kind of raised the issue. So her name is Rachel Richardson, and with the help of her godmother, Lisa Pamplin, who I guess is running for a judge somewhere in Fort Worth area. They were the ones who kind of collaborated to put this story out there, alleging that effectively BYU is racist and, has a bunch of racists who not only yelled a racial slur, but repeatedly yelled racial slurs throughout the entire game, including every time that Rachel served the ball. So there was a whole big kind of hoopla around this. BYU Athletics kind of puts out a statement condemning it. You have BYU's athletic director putting out a statement condemning it, right? You have BYU's women's volleyball coach coming out and condemning it here. And then you have kind of a letter from the girl who was kind of the main kind of whistleblower, if you would, and kind of the letter or the statement that she put out detailing it. You have a whole bunch of news agencies, CNN, NPR, New York Times, ESPN, basically saying, hey, this seems like it was true. BYU actually did this. And then you even have it going up the ladder, right? So the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, acknowledging that it was a racist incident and calling the perpetrator who was kicked out an a-hole. So this is a lot of stuff that happened, and just optically, it kind of makes sense, right? So BYU is Brigham Young University. They are basically Mormons. So Mormons are known to be very conservative. So automatically, just a knee-jerk response from everybody is going to be, oh man, this seems to be a sort of a racist attack by conservatives. And so the media is going to gobble it up. So you even have LeBron James coming here saying, hey, Lisa Pamplin, the godmother, we have your back. This is racism, right? We condemn this from the greatest athlete in the world, right? Amplifying this. And then for 4 days, this person, Andre Hutchins, comes out and says no news organization even investigated the claims. They just took Richardson's word for it until this independent student newspaper released the findings of their own investigation. And basically there was nothing to support this. I mean, everybody is saying it. Observers who were there, police, campus security, BYU's athletic department employees, they've been unable to find any evidence of this, right? And it, just goes on and on. There's speculation that, so BYU's mascot is the Cougar, and Cougar kind of sounds a little bit like the other word, the N word. And so there's some speculation that maybe they were saying that at certain points of the game, and that got misconstrued to be the other word. Who knows, right? So this person, Andre Hutchins, even went through the tape for every single one of the serves. So I guess this girl, Rachel, did 7 different serves. And not once is there audio of someone yelling the N-word here, right? In all 7 serves. So very, very weird. Between the two options on the table of, hey, this is a misunderstanding of the word cougar, and this is a hoax generated by Rachel and her godmother, I'm leaning towards the hoax situation, as opposed to kind of a good faith they were saying cougar and we misheard kind of thing. But who knows what the reality is. I would say, given the response of it, I think this is a situation where the demand for racism just outpaces the supply in this country, and so everybody is on edge all the time about racism, even to the point of basically making it up, right? So ultimately, I'm taking these two stories together, the Boston Children's Hospital situation, which may or may not be a hoax, but we'll see what happens. And then this Duke one, which I think actually is a hoax. And I'm moving this to A tier. kind of part of the course in terms of like how the left operates. So the next up, we have to talk about a little bit of a kind of a non-traditional topic on this channel, which is mostly around politics. But I think it's important to highlight because you have two of like the biggest franchises in entertainment in sort of modern history, kind of going head to head right now. Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power, and Game of Thrones, House of Dragon. And I thought it was interesting to kind of call this out for a moment because they're two very similar stories where you have, a strong, independent, young white woman who's basically starring in a prequel about a fantasy genre or fantasy story. And they're operating in kingdom, ran by men, so therefore kind of the feminist edge with it. And they're trying to achieve their goals, their dreams, their ambitions, right? In this sort of medieval kind of setting. It's been an interesting contrast. So they both, have been out for just a couple of weeks now. More recently, the kind of Rings of Power one, and they're kind of going at it head to head. And for me, this is going to be an interesting kind of like a story or kind of parallel to watch in the weeks and months to come, because what's being articulated by the response and the critics and the people, if you would, is one of these is non-woke, namely the House of Dragon one. And then one of these, the Rings of Power, is being viewed as actually woke. And that's interesting because they both have diversity. Like there's a black guy, I think his name is Corlys Valerian, in the House of Dragon, who is not necessarily like represented in the source material as black. So that is a diversity card, if you would, right? And then there's like more than one black person in Lord of the Rings of Power. But yeah, these two shows are being received very differently by the masses and the media. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how they fare and what the appetite is for this kind of woke capital kind of thing. Rings of Power has like $1 billion budget, $58 million per episode versus the $20 million per episode budget of House of Dragons. Obviously, Amazon is a much bigger player. They have almost 3 times as many subscribers, and they're global as opposed to HBO Max. It's kind of in limited markets, mostly in the West. And so, obviously, from a number standpoint, the Rings of Power is doing better and will do better. But we'll see how long they last, right? I think Lord of the Rings of Power is meant to go for 5 seasons. It's been greenlit for a second one. And this whole kind of woke drama and controversy and their ability to kind of stick to the story and have a compelling set of characters will be interesting to see how that plays out. You have all this woke stuff going on with She-Hulk, which had kind of a rough week this past week with some twerking action going on that kind of got people upset. But we're early on in this one. Both of these shows have a lot of runway to them, but I'll just kind of add this as more or less a watch item to the list for us to kind of monitor and see kind of if anything either explodes in popularity or implodes, right, due to lack of popularity and what that might signal in the culture war around people's appetite for woke content and how heavy that goes. Okay, so the next up, we have to talk about Europe for a moment. So this is actually important. So I didn't talk about this kind of stuff too much in times past because, we saw we saw energy crises happening in places that were not that important. So Sri Lanka had some issue, Netherlands had some issue with their farmers, South Africa. We had some things that were notable, but not necessarily huge. It's gotten to the point now where those little cracks in the armor are kind of becoming a full blown, kind of rift, if you would, with some of our biggest kind of partners in the world, Germany and the UK, experiencing some major energy problems right now. So what just happened is Russia, they cut off the Nord Stream pipeline. And so this actually caused gas prices to surge in Germany by 35%. And that's kind of a big deal. And you have a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. We got taxes going up. You have the EU talking about introducing some sort of radical energy inventions, quote unquote. I already mentioned the Nord Stream pipeline or stream being shut down because of sanctions. Europe is talking about energy rationing now. So, if you can imagine, like, you only have certain windows in order to use energy, and then it's going to be shut off. So it's getting really, really dark is kind of my point with this. And I think it's worth a mention primarily because of two reasons right now. One is the question is, how long before this type of, energy cost inflation reaches the U.S., right? Since you have these green initiatives being rolled out right now, as well as like rolling blackouts in California. It seems only like to be a matter of time before this kind of scenario takes place here in the States. And then number two is we are effectively collaborators with the EU in a current war effort against Russia. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what the U.S.'s response is come this winter as the energy crisis continues to worsen and deteriorate, and what that means for the whole Ukraine war effort, and how much we are willing to bend over backwards to milk and drain and bleed this country dry to continue to support them. So I'll just kind of have a couple of highlights here. You have a protest happening in Germany. Whoops, that's really loud. Sorry. You have a protest happening in Germany against the sanctions and these requests to resume regular energy ties with Russia. So that's kind of a big development. And then you have this weird kind of Wheel of Fortune style TV programming right now in the UK, where viewers are offered the chance to win, quote, "we'll pay your energy bill for 4 months" as the top prize. So no lie, this video has gotten 4 million views. You got these hosts on the show basically saying, "Hey, you can win thousands of euros, or we can pay your energy bills," right? So for 4 months of energy bills being paid is definitely going to be more than the euros. So everybody who calls in, they want to win that one, And so they're talking to one of these guys, and he's like, "Yeah, my energy bills are outlandish. They've tripled or whatever. We need help in this." And then lo and behold, he ends up actually winning the prize for the energy bills to get paid here. So it's kind of crazy, kind of dystopian, kind of nightmare scenario happening here. We'll continue to kind of monitor this, but I think this is huge because it kind of goes back to cost of living. Right now in the U.S., food has gone through the roof, and then gas has been climbing up in terms of gas prices. If energy bills start to climb and utilities start to climb in the next 3 to 6 months as well, that can be a game changer in the culture war and just more existentially overall. So I'm moving that one to B tier. We'll continue to kind of watch and see how bad it gets here. All right, there was an interesting lawsuit that was filed the other day here that I thought would be worth a mention. So the attorney generals for Missouri and for Louisiana, they filed a lawsuit in the Western District of Louisiana against basically Joe Biden and his basically his entire administration. So 700 pages, if you believe it, basically saying, "Hey, we need to find out who did you guys collude with to censor these social media companies." So Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook. You have Ryan Gadurski with Twitter. You got clear and abiding evidence of collaboration, illegal collaboration, and compulsion by the state against these tech companies to censor conservatives and kind of opposing points of view. Who is that? And this guy kind of comes through and he says, going through the lawsuit against the government for coercing social media companies to censor free speech. And he's finding two things so far. One is the government is not providing Anthony Fauci's communications. And then two is Zuckerberg apparently gave Fauci his personal cell phone number back when the pandemic was just starting in March 2020. So it's going to be interesting, right, with Fauci retiring from government this year, what this actually means. And I think there's going to be two main things to watch here. One is, are we going to learn some stuff about what the government did in terms of through discovery through this lawsuit? That would be fascinating. And will that include, Fauci's sort of personal communications? That would be huge because that would actually be ammunition for the Republicans to use against him when they do trials and hearings or whatever. And they've already mentioned that. I think Ron Paul, right, wants to bring Fauci in and question him. So if they have extra data from this lawsuit, from a discovery standpoint, that helps the Republicans a lot. And then two, obviously, if they end up winning the lawsuit, that would be a huge blow to the Biden administration here. So another one of those like kind of semi-early stage, kind of watch and see kind of news stories. I'm moving this to the B category. Good move by the Republicans and these AGs to kind of like take action to investigate these matters. Good use of power and kind of application of it. And we'll continue to monitor and kind of see how it goes. So next thing we have to talk about today, and this is kind of a shift in the culture war a little bit, which is the growing popularity of Joe Biden. And I know that's kind of crazy and hard to believe, but given the Trump raid, given that crazy warlike speech from this past week in Philadelphia, but somehow or another, throughout his entire presidency, right? You look at this chart, he's been going down pretty consistently for over a year, and then somehow or another, around late July, he somehow started ticking upward. So he went from 37, 38 approval to now he's like 42, 43. And so it's something that I wanted to mention here because I think there is some weird shift happening in the culture war and around kind of the popularity of the Dems and of the the Biden administration. That is going to be something to watch and kind of unpack and flesh out and understand better. And there's some interesting kind of signs that maybe things are not looking too good from kind of a conservative standpoint. So you have who I would consider to be a hero and a general in the culture war on the right side, Scott Presler. He's saying today, hey, look, I don't think there's going to be a red wave this fall. It might just be a trickle, except in Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, it's not looking too good. People tell me I would give up everything for the country, but they won't knock on doors or become election workers unless you do something. I don't see the red wave, right? And you have some backlash coming here at the bottom, trying to explain kind of what's happening here. People aren't answering calls or knocks on the door. Maybe Roe v. Wade. Maybe people are just being like quiet about it, right? So this person, Pamela Roth, in today's climate, Biden administration is threatening folks on an almost daily basis. People are probably just not telling the truth about where they stand politically, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of, let's say, interesting shifting of the sands here. The whole Biden administration has been a downward slope for most of this time, but for some reason it's been taken up. Ben Shapiro offers his own reasons here in this thread from this past week or so, as to why this is happening and why Republicans are losing steam in the election. I think he really boils this down to one is the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, and then two is the GOP's sort of obsession with Trump. And he's saying that they're talking about Trump all the time is actually hurting their polls and their chances. I don't know to what extent those two claims are true or false. But it's kind of an interesting set of comments here. Personally, I think that the second one is probably BS because Trump is actually really popular with the Republican Party. His endorsement record is a good example of that. Tim Pool points out that in 2018 or so it was low, and then it got higher and higher in 2020, and now it's like 95%, right? In 2022. So I read that as he's actually becoming more popular with the Republicans, and his endorsement means something, his reputation means something. So I don't know what to really say about this one. I have my own little theory, which is gas prices may be one factor that's maybe not being discussed too much, in addition to the other factors mentioned around fear of persecution and the Dobbs decision and all that other stuff. For most of this year, I guess since late March, early April, the Biden administration has been releasing our oil reserves. And what we've seen since, I guess, June 6th here is oil prices have been going down. So that could be actually a pretty big factor in terms of the turnaround. Maybe it took, I'm just, speculating here, maybe it took about a month or so, after gas prices started coming down, right, for the polls here to start reflecting that, right, come July, and as people start to feel the impact of gas prices going down, maybe that kind of impacted people's behavior. I don't know. Like I'm totally speculating in terms of what the rationale could be. What I will say is this one is definitely an A tier one though. Because like however well Biden is being received, that reflects on his overall party, which therefore reflects on the culture war itself between the GOP and the Dems. So definitely kind of a marked shift here in terms of the tone and tenor of things. So the next thing that I wanted to kind of highlight and touch upon here is like there's been some interesting like how would I say this, like declines, if you would, from the Dems. So Katie Hobbs, she basically got an offer from her rival Kari Lake for the governor position in Arizona, to basically say, look, Kari Lake said, I will debate you anytime, any place, in any venue that you want, with any moderator that you select, with any questions that you want to write. Like you can choose it all. She offered her a crazy offer a few weeks ago, and said, I want to have the debate. Arizona, they deserve the discussion. Let's do it. And Hobbs is like, no. She's like, no. So that was a hell of a rejection, honestly. I was actually a little bit surprised, but maybe I shouldn't have been. I mean, literally, it's completely on her terms, and she still says no. And unlike Mr. John Fetterman here, she doesn't have a mentally impairment or like a mental impairment due to a stroke. So I'm not really sure what her excuse is, right? So in kind of a related news, John Fetterman declined to debate against Dr. Oz, but he says in a statement, quote, I'm eager to put my record and values up against Dr. Oz's any day of the week. So he can barely talk. I mean, this guy is, first of all, he's really ugly. I'm sorry. And he dresses completely terribly for a politician. But hey, I'm focused on substance. But even his substance is absolute trash. And he doesn't seem to be fit for office given his mental and health status. But I'm actually reminded through John Fetterman of Nancy Pelosi's statement from a couple of years ago. She had a very memorable statement. She was like, in New York, Democrats will vote anything with a D next to it, even this glass of water. And that seems to be the tone and tenor of like how they operate these days. There's no need for substance as long as it's against the other party and you're on their side. It's all tribal, chest thumping, and they'll vote for it. So I will say ultimately that this is kind of a tragedy. Like one of the tragedies of the current political climate is like no one feels that they need to convince voters anymore. It's just all about like motivating voters. So there's no like discussion around who's right and wrong anymore. Like people don't give a damn about that. Like you already know like that you're right or that you're wrong. Like, and you're not going to change. It's only about being motivated to actually like go out and vote, to raise money, to give money, to phone bank, to canvas, or whatever. Like motivation is way more important these days than like education or convincing anybody, because it's all about tribe. It's all about gang warfare. It's all about political points and all that stuff. So ultimately I'm going to move this one to the B tier category. Very kind of an interesting development, if you would, but also kind of part of the course, right? No need to debate. Just give your glass of water the D, and people will come out because they're just sheep, basically. But in more positive news, though, I did want to highlight this pretty like good story that I thought was really, let's say, what would I say, inspiring. So there's this PAC, this PAC, Political Action Committee, that put out this ad just talking about like crime in society nowadays. And so I'm not going to play the whole thing because my audio is kind of crazy sometimes, and we don't have all the time in the world. But they actually put together this really, really, really powerful ad talking about the damaging effect of far left policies on crime, particularly in the inner cities. So they just have a ton of this, these different threads just showing, people getting just brutalized all over the country. Violence, robberies, shootings, stabbings. I mean, you name it. All the criminal, abuse that you can imagine being endorsed and, sanctioned, if you would. Portland, look at this, murders up 200%. just all kind of like rampant criminality on the part of woke politicians and woke DAs, many of whom are Soros backed and Soros funded. So very, very powerful thing. This is actually a what is it called? A dark money PAC. So it's dark money means the donors are anonymous, but clearly they're conservative. The Citizens for Sanity, and they're pumping serious money into the culture war to affect people's perspectives going into the November election. And I love what this is doing here, because I think it's hitting on the two most important messages for the GOP. One is law and order, and two is the economy and all this inflation stuff that's happening. So this is hitting on that at a visceral level. And I think this is really, really the kind of stuff that GOP and Republicans should be doing. There's so much like ammunition, so to speak, right, for the right to be using and calling out, that this is just kind of a pitch right down the middle, easy hit for the GOP and its ambitions here. So that's A tier. Good stuff. We need more of that. We need more culture war, PAC videos, these viral threads. I think that thing has like 2 million views, I think it had. So really, really good work by the PAC here. All right. So now the moment that you've all been waiting for, Dark Brandon arises in all of his, splendor, evil, majestic splendor. And I didn't even hit on this other stuff, right? Going back to the whole crime stuff, you have some robbery in Upper East Side, New York, with this like Grand Theft Auto type of stuff happening. And you had Ozzy Osbourne. He's going to be leaving the U.S. because he's terrified of all the violence in Los Angeles, so he's selling his home. But anyway, back to the main theme. So Joe Biden, he gave probably the most infamous and vitriolic speech in American political history, at least out of the White House that I've ever heard. Dark background, blood red, Marines in the back, fists shaking at the skies. Both people on the right and the left were kind of nauseated by the whole speech. And this is part of an escalation. So what happened was, this kind of a play in 3 acts, right? So Act 1 was, apparently he came out and called Republicans semi-fascist earlier this week. So he got some heat for that. And then his press secretary comes out and is like, yeah, that's true. I agree with that statement. And by the way, being a minority is to be an extremist. So if you, like, her statement was, hey, if you don't hold the majority of view held by the population, that makes you almost by definition an extremist. So more inflammatory rhetoric coming out of the White House, right? Leading up to this infamously evil speech, which is really kind of an irony, if you would, because with Joe Biden, even though his approval rating has been going up a bit to 42% or so, he's still like disapproved by the majority of voters, right? So in theory, like her own accusation would make her an extremist, and all those who follow Joe Biden right now. But at any rate, he goes on kind of the warpath here against MAGA Republicans. He basically, in a very kind of lunatic kind of manner, declares war against them and says, you're all crazy, you're all evil, you're all violent, and you should be stopped at all costs. And it was really depressing. I'm not going to milk it, because you probably already heard what the story is all about, since it was the biggest story of this past week. What I will say is, there's a couple reactions here. One is I totally agree with this sentiment from Eric Weinstein. You may have seen, he's like a big right-wing investor, Eric Weinstein. He says, look, I just don't see any path back, at least tonight. I was not looking forward to this speech. It was bad. We seem determined to continue to unravel this amazing country. Gonna go listen to some live blues where no one cares about race. Thankfully, there's a 2-drink minimum. So he goes very sadly and drinks away his woes here. And then Trump comes out. Donald Trump just had a rally, his first rally since the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. And in his speech in Pennsylvania, again, so it's correlating, right, with this whole Philadelphia speech. He comes out and he says, look, Joe Biden thinks of you, MAGA Republicans, as enemies of the state, when in fact he is an enemy of the state. Joe Biden, Trump calls Joe Biden. So pretty crazy stuff here. Huge kind of escalation on both sides. He even reveals that, the FBI had not only raided Mar-a-Lago and his wife's wardrobe, but even raided his son, Barron Trump's room, his teenage sons or whatever. So pretty crazy speech. Honestly, this all just reinforces the fact that we are literally in civil war. I mean, this whole channel is called Culture War, and this is part of the reason why. It's just whether or not it's a hot war or a cold war. And sadly, it seems like we're getting closer to hot war with exchanges like this and speeches like this. And on both sides, to be honest with you, like Trump is right. I do believe he's right. Biden is an enemy of the state. But at the same time, that's a really controversial thing to say, because all it does is make the fire hotter, right? In terms of the tone and tenor. So not looking good. Okay. And the last story for today is I wanted to just hit on this whole Bed Bath and Beyond situation, right? So the CFO of Bed Bath and Beyond, he apparently offed himself this past week by jumping from a high-rise apartment in New York City. He was paying $14,000, something crazy like that. He and his family for this high-rise apartment in New York. I guess it's called Jenga Tower or something like that. And he offs himself. And the reason I think this is relevant, I was debating whether or not to cover this. I think this is relevant because a few folks on the right were talking about this whole My Pillow situation from last year. So you may recall B and Y, I think it's how you say it. They pulled Mike Lindell's My Pillow products from their shelves. And so some were speculating, this is just, an example of get woke, go broke. I don't know if that's the case because, so first of all, they weren't the only ones to pull Mike Lindell's product last year, given the whole election controversy and, Dominion voting and all that stuff. Kohl's did it, H-E-B, the grocery store, Wayfair did it. Who else is on here? There's a lot of companies that actually pulled this. Yeah, Kohl's, right? Walmart. I think Walmart ended up doing it maybe later on in the year. I'm not sure, but Walmart ended up pulling it as well. So it's one of those things where a lot of companies pulled it. It's not just Bed Bath and Beyond that pulled it. And the news for them hasn't been quite as devastating. And the second thing that I would say to refute the idea that, this is a direct reason why this happened to the CFO and why he offed himself is because Bed Bath & Beyond has a $1.2 billion lawsuit. I think it may even be this person himself who offed himself, the CFO, for a pump and dump scheme. So a pump and dump is when you lie about a stock to raise its price and then sell it, and then the stock tanks and declines after that sell. So they had a $1.2 billion lawsuit against them for the pump and dump scheme. So I think my guess is this is more so a way to avoid legal responsibility. The amount of shame and bad press that would come out of it is just really devastating. So he wanted to try to avoid all the ramifications of manipulating the markets effectively for the past 2 years. So not so much about, My Pillow in my opinion. So I'm going to move this to a D in the culture war. Again, huge sign of where we stand from an economic standpoint in this country. Retail is holding on by a thread. You got, crooked executives like this guy who have been lying and manipulating markets, but not necessarily a sign that, MyPillow.com is what makes or breaks these companies. But definitely a bad sign of economic times to come.
Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.